This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Good morning, Browns fans. And as we've come back down, or at least woken up from the euphoric high of Sunday's victory, I'm here to talk about winners and losers from Sunday's game versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now, again, it's going to be a lot more winners than losers this week. You win a division game. That's the right of the victor. But still some things to talk about in the negative area, but also a lot to talk about positively. We're going to start with Deshaun Watson. And I get the feeling that the further away we get from the first half, the more and more people who really didn't watch it are going to be able to lie and convince to you that the first half was much worse than it actually was. Because if you look at the numbers, they're not pretty. I believe at one point he was 1 of 9 in the first half. But if you look at what happened in the game up until that point, you wouldn't have thought watching it that he was 1 of 9 because he was still moving the football, and where he did not have completions for the most part in the first half were because of errors of execution from receivers, right? There were just receivers not in the right spot, or receivers who just did not catch the ball, like David Njoku had a couple plays like that in the first half. All the not, because it all came together in the second half. But I hear this narrative the more and more I see national pieces come out where like, hey, Deshaun played terrible in the first half, but he played better in the second half. And it just wasn't that way. And either way, like, you don't get judged on the halves of, you get judged on the game as a whole. And at the end of the day, he did a lot to help that team win in the fourth quarter. So that's ultimately what the game's going to be judged on. But it's something that I'm kind of on the lookout for. And I think everybody should be on the lookout for. It's like, I thought, and you can go back when I post my live stream highlights during the game, I was like, yeah, at this point, he's kind of just been zero sum, right? He's been a 45-degree day before he went on that hot streak. And when I say a 45-degree day, it's like, hey, he's been able to move the ball. He's not turning it over outside the first throw of the game, where it got tipped on an incredible play by Kyle Hamilton. He's not doing anything crazy, but he's not doing anything to hurt you. If you were playing a lesser team, this would be enough to help you win the game because you got 3 red zone drives. But since you're playing the Baltimore Ravens, it's not enough, and you need him to heat it up a little bit. And that's exactly what he did in that game. I think people are going to take the first half severely out of context and convince you that Deshaun Watson was the reason that this team was struggling in the first half. I think the narrative of this game is getting out of control because people want it to be Deshaun bad, right? Like, I think that is the most thirsty narrative that a lot of people naturally have, is they want to grab whatever Deshaun bad that they can grab and make it that. But the story in the first half was just, hey, we weren't executing super well defensively. They got 10 of those points off of the defense. And it was because the defense just wasn't executing great in the first quarter of this game. They really tightened it up once they got to 17, and, occasional drive here or there. It's the Baltimore Ravens are a really good team. And I thought the offense throughout that first half, they did the second best option, right? The best option would have been to score touchdowns, keep back up with it, but they were able to put points up consistently to keep you in that game. On that, with the first half of Deshaun's game, I feel like a lot of people are going out their way to make it seem like that first half was much worse than it was. But from my view of it, I thought that, look, there were some throws he definitely wants back from that first half. He wasn't good. I didn't say that. I know people aren't going to confuse me for saying that, but I didn't say he was good in the first half, but I do think that he was like he was neutral in that first half. He wasn't good, nor was he bad. And we have a bad time of really doing anything with that, because in today's media landscape, something either has to be the best thing you ever seen or the worst thing you ever seen. He was neutral in the first half, and then he really turned it up and became a factor in the game in a positive direction in the second half. And that's the kind of game that he played. And that's what you needed out of Deshaun, right? You needed him to hit that gear and be a playmaker. And he made some tremendous plays down the stretch. I thought he made a couple of good plays in the first half. There was one play in the first half where he was being held by a defensive lineman, and he found a way to like get this ball out to, I believe, Elijah Moore. And it was a big first down that led to your first points of the day when you were down 14-0. Thought that was a huge play to make there, because if you go 3 straight drives with no scores and you gave up a turnover on the opening drive, then I think a lot of people would start to lose faith. Defense might cave in. Getting those 3 points there was very huge in that way, and I thought that he made a couple of good throws on that drive to get there. I talked about the 3rd and 7 drop by David Njoku. Thought that could have really led to some points, because then you would have had the ball in the 7. Running the ball becomes an option to score there. Instead, you get a 3rd and long. You go with the fade ball to Cedric Tillman. He's not ready for it. You know, it is what it is. But then the second half happened. I thought he made a lot of impactful plays, both with his legs and with his arm. There was the one play where he fumbled on the final drive, right, where he got tackled, fumbled. Wyatt Teller jumps back on top of it, but then you create a 2nd and 19, and that's a drive killer a lot of times. But what did Deshaun do? Okay, you fumble here. You got the ball back. Take advantage of the opportunity. Comes in, steps in there, throws a strike on 3rd down. Well, no, on 2nd and 19 to get it to 3rd and 4 to Amari Cooper. On a 3rd and 2, my bad. Get it to 3rd and 2 to Amari Cooper, and to get you to the 40-yard line in the final drive. And he made, I think, a couple more plays like that. There was the one touchdown throw to Elijah Moore. I thought that he really did a good job of making plays, being patient, and outside of that opening play interception, which was more of a great play by Kyle Hamilton than it was this horrible mistake by Deshaun Watson, right? You know, we know what tip balls at the line of scrimmage interceptions are. They just kind of happen. It's not really an indictment of a quarterback either way. It's why I'm not going to give, like, even Lamar, I'm not going to give him that much flack for throwing that interception in the 4th quarter. It's a tip ball interception. Like, shit happens, man. But yeah, the tip ball interception happened, but after that, he really didn't put the ball too much in harm's way. You know, there was the one fumble on the last drive that Wyatt Teller did a good job getting on top of, but I felt like he did a really good job taking care of the football and just being what you needed to be able to chip this lead away at the very least. Obviously, you want him in the first half eventually to be warm enough or have this offense going at a level to where you're scoring those touchdowns, but that's not going to happen every week. Some weeks you got to get by with what you can get and then figure out how you can win that game with what you got right there. So I thought Deshaun played a phenomenal game. I don't think he's going to get very much credit for it because, again, the numbers aren't going to be spectacular and people are going to have their outs to tell people that it wasn't a good game. I've already seen even Browns fans rush to do this, but let's be real here. If we're being honest about it, that was a spectacular performance, especially in the second half. And I thought that Deshaun Watson made a difference. I mean, made a massive difference in why you won this game. And I think it's time that we stop lying to ourselves, Browns fans. Like, whether you are on this Deshaun Watson train or not, because if you don't like him personally or what he's been accused of and everything that kind of comes along, the baggage with Deshaun Watson, we can't lie to ourselves about what it's been on the field and what the reality has been on the field. And the reality on the field is, since he's come to Cleveland, the record's 8-4 with him. This year, when he starts, they're 5-1. They're in every game that they've played in with Deshaun Watson within a point at the end of the game. And even to the people who are like, well, he didn't have much to do with all of those wins. I call bullshit on that argument because I've seen that argument out there, but I don't see anybody support it, because I can point to 2 wins he had not much to do with that he started. There was the Indianapolis game and there was the Houston Texans game, his first game back. He had nothing to do with those victories. I'll point that out. But every other victory, he certainly had something to do. He was responsible for multiple scores in the Baltimore game. He was really good in that game, quite honestly. We thought that was his best game of the 6. He threw for 3 touchdowns in the Washington game, which was a win in 2022. You come back to this year, you're not going to sit here and look at me with this dead eye and tell me he had nothing to do with the win over the Cincinnati Bengals. He was a huge part of that victory. He was a huge part of the Tennessee Titans victory. He was a huge part of this victory. Like, I don't get where people come with this take that he had nothing to do with any of these wins that he have here. The fact of the matter is, whether you like Watson or not, he helps this team win. He is clearly a helpful option to winning. Now, has he won enough to justify the trade and the contract? We'll get there when you have enough time to evaluate that, right? Once we get to the end of the season, we'll really see how we're feeling about that. But as of right now, you have to look at what's out there. You have to look at what he's put on the table, and it's been closer to what we've wanted than not. And it certainly hasn't been exactly what we've wanted, right? I think we would want more than 6 wins where he felt like he was, because we would want him to play in more games in his time span. But just given the sample size that we got, man, like, it's not doom and gloom or whatever. It doesn't look like it's overwhelmingly in a negative direction. So yeah, I think that people are going to be a little bit hard on this one for whatever reason. And I think that's kind of ridiculous, because I'm just pointing out all the things. And look, you don't got to go and buy a Deshaun Watson jersey. You don't have to endorse everything that he's ever been accused of off the field. But you do have to, be fair about what we're actually seeing. And if we're being fair about what we're seeing, the signs look really good for this year, for Deshaun really living up, or having a chance to live up at some point to what you traded to get him. Because I mean, every win this year that he's played in, he's been a significant factor. And when you've seen this team with him versus without him, the point differential is significantly different. And they just look like a different team when he's out there. We got to stop entertaining this lie that we're telling ourselves that, like, oh, if we'll be fine without. No, Watson is one of the most important players on this team. And it's been proven, because we've seen what the struggle was for this team the last few weeks, where we had PJ Walker out there, who I know people got all their opinions about PJ, but PJ's a middle to upper class backup. Like, you're usually getting around a PJ Walker level of play from backup quarterback. And you see what it is with the starter, and he's definitely a true starting quarterback in NFL. We just got to see if he's going to be elite, if he's going to be top tier. We'll see where he's at with that. But I've just already noticed some like shenanigans with how people are talking about this game from Deshaun. And I think it's silly. I really do. If literally any other quarterback in Cleveland Brown history had this game, y'all would be gassing it up. Like, imagine if Baker had this game. We know how people would be reacting. Hell, if Colt McCoy had this game, if Deshaun Kaiser had this, like, we know how we would be reacting if somebody other than Four, who has the baggage that he has it. But that's not an excuse to to lie to yourself. You know what I mean? It's not an excuse not to be in reality. And I think a lot of people are trying to find whatever excuse they can to live in reality, where they're right about whatever determination they made on a trade 2 months ago, when that's just not how things work. You got to look at things at how they are. You got to look outside and look at what the weather is. And the weather looks pretty good with this Deshaun Watson trade right now for the Cleveland Browns, after having a couple rainy days. And that's just how this thing works in the NFL. Another winner, David Njoku. The law office, let me rephrase this. I had a more clever way of getting into this, but the law office of David Njoku, Amari Cooper, and more, because I felt like they all three as a unit really played and were complementary to each other. We know that Amari Cooper is going to be the workhorse of the bunch. He had 98 yards, 6 receptions. He continues to build upon what is on pace to be a career year for himself. And then you have guys like David Njoku and Elijah Moore, who you want to, finish around the edges, get you down the field, get you a chunk play here or there, or finish in the end zone. And Elijah Moore caught the game's only touchdown pass of the day from Deshaun Watson, his first touchdown pass of the year. And this is the kind of stuff that you want to see Elijah Moore be a part of, right? I think we all have this fantasy of Elijah Moore getting like a 100-yard day or 125-yard day, and maybe that will come. But if Elijah Moore continues to give you these 50-yard, 1 touchdown games, or 70-yard, no touchdowns or 70-yard one. Like, if he just gives you this kind of production, that's really what you need from him. And the same can be said for David Njoku again. You know, David's not somebody we're going to require to get 130, 140, 150. That's what Amari Cooper's for. He's the 100-yard guy. He's the big yardage guy. But David's somebody we need to get those 50 to 60 to 70, you know what I mean, those little intermediate chunks to help the offense continue to move. And I thought that those three really did a good job playing off of each other. I thought they put a really solid game together as a receiving unit, and I thought this was one of the first times they've done that all year. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. Thought that they played really well in this game. And this is more or less what we wanted to see out of them. I want to also give some love here to Garyon Christian, James Hudson, and the interior offensive line. Now, let's start with the two backup tackles, Garyon Christian and James Hudson. I don't think I really heard much about Garyon Christian in this game, and that's a great sign. When you have a backup tackle, and that means I didn't hear him being called for penalties. I didn't hear him getting beat or being taken advantage of. I think he may have gave up one or two pressures, or maybe one sack in this game. But it wasn't really that big of a deal. Like, he did a good job holding up, and I thought that this would be the case. I thought that James Hudson and Garyon Christian would be able to hold up because, one, I trust this organization. They have earned that trust in these kind of situations. Look at what they've been able to do with backup tackle play in years past. You just go back to the 2020 season. They were able to finagle up some backup tackle play multiple times throughout that season, and even in the playoff run that year. And they did a great job doing it. Remember, Blake Hance and Michael Dunn ended up playing tackle for you at the end of that Pittsburgh game. And even in that Chiefs game where you had a chance up until the very end, you had those guys playing tackle. You were able to finagle that together because you have Bill Callahan, you have Kevin Stefanski, you have Andrew Berry. And when those three put their heads together to figure out a plan for the offensive line, even if you have to duct tape something together for a week like this, I think that they're really good at it. Now, next week, there's no duct tape strong enough for TJ Watt, right? This week, there's like the Ravens don't have edges that are too strong for duct tape. They have Jadeveon Clowney, David Ajabo, and Odafe Owe, who are all fine enough players, but they're not duct tape proof players. These are guys who can be duct taped. And the Browns did a good job of duct taping those players. Now, next week, Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, both of those two guys are too good for duct tape. So if you have to duct tape something, you want to be able to get away with just duct taping one position on the offensive line, preferably on the left side. So if Garyon Christian has to play again, you live with that. But you want DeJuan Jones back this week, right? You really do want DeJuan Jones back, and you want to be able to use James Hudson as a utility piece to come around and help Garyon Christian on that other side. So that is what the plan is for next week with tackle. But this week, I felt like they did a good job of duct taping the solution together. And I thought that those guys did a good job of maintaining what they were asked to maintain. And I thought this interior offensive line, for the first time in a very long time, played at 2020 levels. Joe Bitonio, he had a couple bad plays and pass sets, but when it came to run blocking, this unit was dominating all game. You saw the push at the end of the game. That was all interior offensive line. They just really did a good job whipping ass. And I thought that they also did a good job on that right side with James Hudson running the ball against the Baltimore Ravens early in this game, using James Hudson's athleticism to kind of get those edges against the Ravens, who are a pretty athletic front. So that was a great thing to see. The run blocking, the interior offensive line play, I thought they did a really good job of keeping Jerome Ford clean through that first level and allowing him to be special and get to the second level, or if he does get to the second level, assist him. They were really physical this week. Hopefully they come back against Pittsburgh, play even more physical, because that front is going to be even more of a pain in the ass than this week's front was. So got to get right for next week, but it was nice to see it for this week. Jerome Ford, somebody I mentioned, is another winner in this conversation. Thought he did really good. 107, 17 carries. 6.8 off the top of my head, I think it is, yards per carry. Either way, it's a big number. He was excellent in this game. And he's starting to kind of mature into this running back, this feature back that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry kind of see him as. Thought he's really maturing into it and kind of learning, okay, I don't have to rush here, figuring out his superpowers, all of those things. Thought Jerome Ford did a great job. D-Hop, Dustin Hopkins, look, you missed the extra point, but I don't ever worry about Dustin Hopkins owing me money. I know he good for it. And what did he do? He was good for it, right? He owed me $5. He gave me 10 back. Shout out to D-Hop. Pay me back with interest. So I ain't worried about him. He the one kicker you're not going to hear me complain about unless he starts doing some egregious shit. But, you know, I'm good on D-Hop. That's the kind of dude I want kicking football. You know what I mean? Not no flashy guy. Like, you just want to have somebody there that you could trust to make the easy ones. And that's what D-Hop does. He'll miss one or two occasionally. That's fine. But you shouldn't be asking that much out of your kicker. Myles Garrett, what more can be said? He's already at 11 sacks. Well, he was at 9.5 to start the game, right? And then he got a half. And yeah, I think Myles is at 11 sacks now. I mean, you know, I was talking about this during the live stream, and it was kind of funny to me because if you go back before Myles Garrett, right? BMG, before Myles Garrett, we didn't have that many guys in this franchise that got plus 10 sacks. I think Myles is like the first guy to do it since like Jameer Miller, or maybe like that first year of Cam Wembley. Like, did Paul Kruger ever get to 10 sacks? Like, I don't think it happened very often. Like, it might have happened like 3 times before Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett walks in here, plays a rookie year where he gets like 7.5. And then in 2018, he gets 13.5. And basically from that point on, from 2018 to now, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons in a row, Myles Garrett has had at least 10 sacks. And like, it's like we forget how hard it was to get one person to have double-digit sacks. Like, how many people did the Browns draft over the years to be the guy that's going to finally get double-digit sacks? Like, we drafted like Barkevius, Mingo, all these dudes, man, that we swore was going to be the one to get us to double-digit sacks. Myles Garrett comes in here, does it 6 times in a row, and like legitimately with ease. Like, two of those seasons with 12.5, that was a shortened season. 2020, he got 13.5 his second year. But every other season, he's gotten to 10 with like time to go. Like, I believe he got to 10 in 2020 really quick. I know he got to 10 in 2020, whatever the year was where he smacked Mason Rudolph, 2019. He got to 10, like 9 games. He's already at 10, and the Browns are at their 9th game. But they're 6-3, so they're in 9 games. So he did it in 9 games this year. He's at 11. And he keeps like getting to like 10 sacks so easily that I feel like we forgot how hard it was to find somebody that could even get you 10 in a whole season. Like, and I feel like sometimes we take it for granted because you'll hear people say like, oh, well, Myles only had 16 sacks last year. Only 16 is crazy. Like, that's the single season sack record for the Cleveland Browns. And he broke it back to back. And he's very likely going to get more than 16 this year. He leads the league in sacks. Like, I understand that we appreciate Myles Garrett's greatness, but we kind of did the same thing with Nick Chubb, where it's like, oh, we watched Nick Chubb so much that when we got Jerome Ford, we were just so spoiled from watching Nick Chubb that we couldn't appreciate Jerome Ford at all. And we just kept picking at what we think Jerome Ford could be because we think that is what Nick Chubb is without realizing how special of a player Nick Chubb is. I feel like whoever, and like I hope this is years down the line, has to fill the gap of being the next Myles Garrett for the Cleveland Browns. Man, that dude ain't ever going to be up. We did this with Joe Thomas too at left tackle, right? Where we just never let Jed Wills live down the fact that he's not Joe Thomas. And like that poor bastard who has to come in here and be the feature edge rusher at the Myles Garrett. Like, we're going to be like, why don't you get 10 sacks every year? Forgetting the fact that we might have had 4 10-sack seasons. Myles Garrett, I believe, by himself, has had more 10-sack seasons in his very short career so far, in his very young career so far. That's a better way to put it. he has had more 10-sack seasons in his very young career than I'm pretty sure the Browns had in expansion since expansion before they drafted Myles Garrett. Somebody can stat check me on that one, but I'm pretty sure it's like 2 10-sack seasons that we had. Myles Garrett by himself has 6. Like I feel like we don't appreciate this enough of this level of domination. And Myles is really making his name known for the Defensive Player of the Year award at 11 sacks, which is great. Put him ahead of TJ, who's only at 10. Well, he's at 10 and a half sacks. Just some incredible numbers this year. But also like the advanced numbers have him just so far above and beyond even TJ Watt and especially like Danielle Hunter. So yeah, Myles is just, he's been on another level. We got to appreciate it. I thought Grant and Awalk did a good job today. I thought Greg Newsome got his first interception today. It was a pick 6. Thought he held up pretty well. MJ Emerson as well. Thought he held up pretty well. Thought both of those guys held up well. There's a lot of injuries in the secondary, but that's what I'm going to talk about when it comes to the technically loser stuff. But the stuff that's not great. And let's put it like that. Winners and not great. Injuries keep mounting. That is a concern, right? Juan Thornhill left this game, didn't come back with a calf injury. Denzel Ward left this game in concussion protocol. Good news. He was cleared of concussion protocol during the game. They held him out for a neck injury. If you've seen the video on how he got hurt, Ronnie Stanley just kind of missiled into his face. And I think that they saw that play and decided we just going to not take a risk with you, Denzel. We know you have a history of concussion. I understand that you cleared concussion protocol, but we saw the hit that you took. We going to hold you out, big dog. Like, I think that's a smart play by this staff to make sure that you don't throw him out there, and maybe he had a concussion symptom that he was able to maybe get through the test with because he's been through so many or whatever it was. Like, let's wait till we can really get that diagnosed before we get overzealous about whether he should be playing or not. So I think they held him out as a precaution measurement. They'll look at him, see if he could practice this week and everything else, but he's not in concussion protocol. He cleared concussion protocol. That's not to say that he might do a test on something this week and get back into it. Even though I think you can only get in concussion protocol during the games. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think if he's cleared it during the game, he's not going to be then entered into it unless he's diagnosed with the concussion afterwards. But yeah, I don't think he's not diagnosed with the concussion currently, but I think they held him out as a precaution just in case he might have one that's just a little bit more difficult to detect. Denzel Ward, he's had a lot of concussions. You don't want to play him if you feel like there's any risk of him having a concussion. They're just going to play it safe with him because that could end his career if it happens too much and really drastically ruin his quality of life once he retires, which, I mean, I don't want to see Denzel Ward become another sad story about how we should really protect against, these head injuries. So whatever you got to do to protect him against that and make sure that he doesn't have to deal with those kind of outcomes and that he can live comfortably after his football career, that's what you need to do. And I'm glad that they took those steps. But I don't know what the severity of Juan's injury is. Denzel, we'll see what that is as the week progresses. Deshaun was in a boot, an ankle injury. He was in a boot. I would advise people not to be overreactionary to that, because remember when Myles Garrett was in a boot after the Ravens game, and that never became a thing again. I think they just, as a precaution, I think this is we got to get used to how this staff runs stuff, how this organization likes to be ran now that we are kind of a real organization at this point. We've had that much continuity. This organization, when it comes to injuries, they play things safe. And it will be frustrating at the time because they won't give you all the information. But in the long run, they do play this thing safe, and that's usually the best way to go. So if they feel like there's any instance of an ankle injury, they're going to immediately put you in the boot. They don't care about the optics of it because they know that putting you in the boot is going to be better for that ankle than not putting you in the boot. They did the same thing with Myles Garrett in week 4. Ended up that Myles was fine. We haven't really heard about that ankle since. They're doing the same thing with Deshaun Watson right now. Now, it's an ankle injury. That's the kind of thing that Deshaun Watson has a history of being able to play through. He did mention a shoulder in his post-game interview with Fox. I'm a little bit more concerned about that. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens once they get back to practicing. Is he going to be practicing? Is he going to be throwing? Football games are tough. everybody's hurt at the football game, especially the Monday after. We'll see where they're sitting on Wednesday. But yeah, you got to monitor those injuries. Mike Ford, just because I'm not sure what this injury is to Denzel Ward, and they don't have a backup slot corner in Cam Mitchell anymore. And I'm really worried about like how well Mike Ford's gonna hold up if he is if he's asked to be a cover corner, because I just don't think he's very good as a cover corner. And, I saw him get diced up in camp routinely. Like if you ever look at a highlight for Donovan Peoples-Jones or Elijah Moore, a lot of it was on 28. And they're not exactly lighting up the league right now. So I do worry about that. I don't want Mike Ford out there as a cover corner. Like if he has to play the slot, that's a little bit different, but he's not necessarily the greatest slot in the world either when he's played in his NFL career. So I just don't want him out there in defense situations. He's more of a special teamer. I wonder if they bring in somebody to handle those responsibilities, because right now I just don't feel great about Mike Ford if he has to be in that spot. With the safeties being injured too, Juan Thornhill, you just want to be in a good spot there, because you lose with the safety being out. You lose one less option that you could throw in there at the slot or throw in there instead of a slot to have extra DBs on the field, because you don't have that third DB to spare like you do when you have Juan healthy and then Ronnie McLeod and then obviously Grant Delpit. But hopefully they figure it out. But yeah, they got to figure out a solution there, because I don't think Mike Ford can survive in coverage long term with this team, especially once you start playing better teams with better receiving rooms than the Baltimore Ravens. James Prochet, he had that muff punt. I think that's the only time he really had to do anything in the game. It sucks that he muffed it in M&T, where he was trying to get a revenge game going. I hope they keep him at punt return and just like try to forget that happened, because I do think he could be a decent punt returner, but we'll see what happens next week. But that's my winners and losers. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.